visit the other schools. They all, because again, it's the familiarity.
Right.
There's,
Even
training
if
that they
just
go
spent
on
time
to.
with the 8th grade,
Yeah.
you might get, that relationship before they get out here.
All right, we keep that back to this.
Well,
We were-
just one last comment on it. I think a warrant article is a good idea, but can you see if there's any other way to do this? Yes, or do other districts do it any differently?
We had one in Dover, and the value they provide is not for,
15 years.
yes, it might help out in an active, so everybody thinks of like the active shooter aggressively going in and the SRO is probably gonna be the
First one.
target. Because in all these cases, the individual already knows what's going on in the school. But really, when you pay that kind of money, you're looking at having a resource in the school that helps defray from our SRO work with supervision, deterring all sorts of small type crimes that go on throughout the school. Is a much bigger school. We had about 1,400 kids in that school throughout the day. And we had one dedicated resource officer. They helped with quickly removing instances that could have turned into bigger problems. So they acted, a little bit in the area of guidance, security. They really fit in as part of the staff. So they didn't just sit in some room and somebody radio them in, take this guy out in cuffs. They didn't do that. They're really an active part of the school.
Well, I understand
Funding,
that
yeah.
part. but
So
I-
funding-wise, the only other way, it's
How to set it up.
so like in Goffstown, we had a resource officer at the high school, and it was totally, the school district didn't pay anything into it. It was totally funded by the police department.
Yeah.
Because in reality, at the end of the day, although you're a multi-town, so there's other towns that kick into it, but at the end of the day, it's all the same money. Like, you budget it here, they budget it
money
there,
one way or
and
the
they
other.
budget it.
Yeah.
So the town of Bristol budgets a new police officer and then budgets the revenue for it. We budget it and pay off the police, pay the town.
Yeah.
So it's really dependent upon who's, who wants it to, how you want to approach it as far as budget goes. And this town certainly has chosen this direction, which is how we got to where we were with budgeting it. Because it was historically that way. But the town can just pick up the officer and send them to the school. The plus of that is that they have far more flexibility. So if they're short on officers, we just don't get a resource officer that day. He's on detail or on a duty if they're short. If you have this type of arrangement where we're paying for the officer, they don't have that, they lose that basically flexibility to do that.
And they don't have enough offices to do that, and I don't think they're gonna be able to get one.
We entertained some other variations of a single resource officer because we wanted, if you think about it, it really is a part of the police. This is part of the community, and I was pushing. We only paid $45,000, but I was pushing to have us not pay any and have it be part of a single force where they do interact with students from all schools. They're never specifically at any one location at a given time, but they're always near or at a school throughout the day. This makes it very hard for predictability. It does something that Israeli forces tend to do. You don't see a static force sitting there, but they're a constant resource. Plus, all the officers are trained on their police how to work within our school. There are alternatives to that model, and we did explore some of them. It's easier to explain though, having one resource officer. Complex things like that are going to take time to adopt, and usually have to wait for another district to do it.
Mimi, did you have a point?
I just wanted to say I've been at the middle school 15 years and I've seen one fight, and heard of one fight, and unfortunately it was in front of me and I was on duty. But for violence, no. Truancy, yeah. We could really use a truant officer. One we could send out to the house and say, get this kid out of bed and get him to school, because the parents can't do it. And we have parents calling and asking for help to do that, because some kids just don't want to go to school. But for violence, teasing, yes. And we take that very seriously, and it's handled. But I don't know about the high school, but I wouldn't be surprised, if it made a lot more sense in that setting than it does. I mean, I can see coming down and talking to the 8th graders before they go up there and, establishing the connection and that kind of stuff, but.
Because they're going to be the most vulnerable when they get here.
Right.
Because they're the new kids.
Right. There's a lot of supports for them too, though. So, but
Yeah, but once they're here, they're the little fish, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So bringing the discussion full circle, I'm inclined to think that Jeff's idea to allow the electorate to decide is what's prudent here, and I think the message will be loud and clear. If we take that approach, then answering Stacy's question on an equivalency basis, we could stay at essentially zero impact by doing a separate warrant article, and if it passes, the voters want it, and then adding the 1.5% pool for salary increases.
Well, what if it's just the amount in the budget for the SRO?
Well, I mean, it's the equivalent. It's 73,830 versus
So-
72.
I wouldn't even mind going a little more than I give it. Give them $100,000.
Well, that's the 2% number.
Yeah.
So process-wise, so because we prepared a budget for you, and I know we don't do motions now, but then you would want to make a motion to reduce the budget by 72,000 for the SRO, and then you would want to make a motion to direct us to make a warrant article for that.
Well, it could be a combination by just suggesting to you that the deletion be made and the addition be made.
It could be, I'm just used to protocols of making motions
Yeah.
on those things.
I mean, we haven't come to a final number
Right.
yet, and it's an exercise until we know what the Budget Committee puts in front of the deliberative session that gets voted upon and gets passed on Election Day.
Right, but this is your
Okay.
budget, this is the budget you're sending forward.
Correct.
And so
It's our exercise.
Right, and so you would want, in my experiences, you would want to make a motion to make sure that the board was fully supportive of that.
Correct.
And that it wasn't just
Well, first let's.
and that it was on the record as to who decided what.
But if you use the warrant article, then that 72,000 never gets in the budget.
Correct, it would be
Right.
put in the warrant article.
But I do believe if it's in the budget, then it will get cut at the budget committee.
That's the difference. That's why Jeff's idea is, okay, let's broaden this up to what the public wants to do. And that will be decided in three places, really. The deliberative session, Election Day, and the town meeting in Bristol.
I guess can I pose a question?
Sure.
So I think this board should act on what this board would like to do, not what they think the budget committee would do or the public. You are the representatives of the public, and so this board should make a decision based on what information the board has and how the board would like to, what the board is comfortable
And
putting
that's what we'll
forward.
do. We will do that. So the discussion is centering around taking the approach Jeff has suggested. That's my sense. I could be wrong.
But Ruby's original question was adding the 72,000 to the,
Yes, making the swap.
and not
So,
having a resource
Do we want to do that
officer.
as multiple motions or one motion?
Well,
It can all be one motion.
it can be
We gotta
one
agree on
motion
a figure.
after agreeing on what's gonna be made up, the budget number is gonna be made up of. We can direct the superintendent to,
But this entire conversation started out of, do you want to set aside a certain amount of money?
Correct.
To fix what's wrong here?
Correct.
And I do, so can I make a motion?
Yes.
well, when it comes time, yes.
Okay.
And that's
So your time?
where we wanna line things up, is to agree on what the approach will be. Sue?
I would rather see two separate motions.
We can do
I'd like
it
to
that
see
way.
one about this, it may or may not be the same figure, and a different one about that, because I don't really want to,
Make this
Want it to be
dependent
a
on the.
Yeah,
swap.
one shouldn't be
I
tied to
know.
the other.
Yeah, it'll be crystal clear. Yeah. We
Just
can
as a-
just agree on what we wanna do after discussing it.
I was just gonna give you kind of the scope of within the tax cap. If you were to be looking at taking the funds allocated to the SRO, you would have now about $650,000 of room under the tax cap to work with.
Plus
And
350.
the three, well,
Starting with the-
you, fund balance, you would not be able to use for something like this unless,
I'm just saying, plus 350. We'll be rolling in the dough.
Sure, but that would eliminate also your contingencies. You're right though, you do have that in that area, so you have 350 in fund balance. And from your revenue position, you would have about 650,000. And I know Stacy and I talked a little bit about it for raise situations. You probably want to treat with some parity the support staff with what you would have available for contract negotiations with teachers, because these are the people that don't get the steps, don't bargain, So I personally, we're looking at it, if we're going to be fixing some of the disparity already in their steps, this would be a good opportunity to show support for those, and we're also cutting a significant number of support staff as it is, to say this is the value we put on, and that's really what a wage really is. This is the value that the board assigns to these people.
Mike.
We did that last year.
I know, but it's tough to always
But
hit
it's
the
tough to always,
non-union
yeah.
folks when you're looking at,
Right.
Yeah, so
and
you have to
these-
just
these
just
don't-
take into consideration
But last
what
year
your
was-
negotiations.
Last year was a percentage
Yeah.
increase, and I am concerned about the inequity with the experienced and the
So
inexperienced.
Stacy asked, we don't give her a percentage, we give
So-
her a number.
Right,
Yeah.
and
Right, and then let us
So-
come back to you with a
Right.
proposal.
So,
But
These are kind of guidelines for what we would use as a pool of funds to use on these
let me give you a
raises.
guideline, I'd like to
Mike.
make a motion.
Mike, you
When the
really
time-
don't have the 650 because
Well,
if we
spit out
do
a
the
number.
warrant
Keep
article
saying when the time comes.
with the 72,000,
Then you would be
Yeah,
stuck
prep
with a
it, prep it,
5.8,
yeah.
yes.
then you have to allow for
Right.
that.
Correct.
So you still at the 5.8.
Yeah.
So,
now, just to clarify, Stacy did show me the work that's being done regarding the support staff and the realignment that she's attempting to do along those lines. And it's going to be a tedious task, but she needs the flexibility to have the pool of money available to offer it where it's due. So that's the nature of the request.
so a number.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with your suggestion. I'd like to make a motion that we budget $100,000 for the salary realignment or payroll realignment, or whatever you want to call it, for the support staff.
And I agree with that.
Okay, when it comes time to do that, that's one of the motions that should be considered. Here's one for Jeff regarding the warrant, I'm sorry, for the SRO.
Do I need to mention that we're gonna remove it from the budget?
Yes, you should.
Remove it from the
Well-
budget and turn it into.
Well, hold on. A third article, I believe, should be to modify the budget to delete the SRO funding and reduce the amount to, whatever that is. Ruby's motion will be to increase the budget by the $100,000, which coincides with Sue's request to do this separately for purposes of a support staff salary increase pool.
I would say, I would say support staff, admin,
Yeah,
and.
okay,
Well,
that's the
Program
point.
specialist.
Here's what I have so
And then
far.
and then the final motion would be yours to put a SRO officer on the warrant and to direct the superintendent to come up with acceptable wording so that it would fly.
I have to ask Stacy
Okay.
a question. What is admin?
Administration, that's anybody who's in admin, so principals, SAU administration.
They
That's
got significant raises this last year.
Okay, so we would look at that.
Yeah.
The other thing is that for administration, I always view administration should not always have to be equitable in that if you have a high performer, then you want to reward them. If you have somebody who is coasting, they don't get as rewarded.
Right.
And because you can negotiate those individually as well, so.
So my proposal is,
When we come to it,
okay, well, I don't know if the wording is appropriate, so,
when we come to it.
okay.
Hold
Are we
on,
there?
we're almost there. Are we interested in discussing the budget any further? We seem to be coming to agreement on a number.
So I just had a couple of questions. Now, are there no truant officer amounts in this year's budget?
We didn't have them in this year's budget.
Yeah.
So I cautioned it when I looked at the line item and I went over to payroll and like, why is there any funds in this? And there really shouldn't be. So I took them out.
Yeah, we don't really have
We
it.
don't have a truant.
I mean, you have to declare yourself a truant officer, which I think is probably like our guidance counselors who
Yeah.
call and go check up on students, and I think
Just call
occasionally
the
they'll call the
police
police
and send
department
them
if
out.
there's somebody who hasn't
Right,
been
so
here,
You
they're-
don't
but,
even have a
It comes
stipend
in-
for it.
Comes under there, yeah, because I think, aren't you required to have someone?
yes, you're required by
like
law
that?
to have a dedicated truant officer.
Right, but it can be one of our guys.
It can be one of our
That are already
staff.
paid
Yep,
to that, okay.
exactly.
It
It doesn't have to be a separate person.
The other thing was, I noticed a lot less travel for the SAU office. Is there some reason for that?
Just not driving as far. Yeah, I think we level funded.
Yeah, well, see, it's that
What do you- it seemed like
little car
less.
that's good on gas.
Yeah, it's-
Yeah,
Yeah, but I thought it went by the mile.
it does go by a mile. I don't know, we're not
So-
very consistent in turning that stuff in.
Oh,
yeah, so, and one of the things on some of those accounts is we level funded them or looked at historical usage. Again, as we go through this year, we'll get a better handle on what is coming out of those funds. I mean, there's still a couple of accounts, like our professional development account, that we're still tracking, like, okay, what wholly comes out of that, so that we can budget better in the upcoming years. Again, it's hard with, you have to build a budget after we've been here.
Spend this 100.
Oh, absolutely, we will come back to you, oh, absolutely. So we don't have authority, so we'll come back to you with a proposal. I don't have authority
Yeah,
to
it'll be-
increase salaries.
It'll be outlined after the analysis is done.
Two
Now,
more.
go ahead, Sue.
Line 1738, which you must know right off the top of your head. DES principal, there was a 5,348.22.
Is that on the Excel spreadsheet, 1738, or is that a function code?
It
'Cause I
was
don't
in,
recognize that. It's not a function
it
code.
was in one of the last handouts that I got.
Tonight? or
Well,
the
I just wondered,
previous?
is that in another line now or something? Was
Could
it
you just
that
explain it? I'm
stipend
sorry,
or
I
Just remember
missed
what
the
it
first
was.
part of it.
It
Yeah,
just
it's
said
on
it
the
was under.
Excel sheet, 77047,
Can you give me the account number?
2410, 11133.
I'm thinking maybe it's just in another line, but I just wanted to make sure.
Maybe it's on an even page.
What's the
It's not even them.
22 is middle school.
410,
Is it, what number?
What's Danbury?
Well, it's the
Hebrews
function
35.
code's 2410, and I've got the budget listed by function, so.
But
Yeah,
didn't they say
there-
33?
There
Didn't they say
actually is no
PDS?
111.
2410-111, that would be a wage account, and that would be, I believe, a stipend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not,
Um,
it's on page
A
48.
$77,000.
Salaries, principal, high school.
No, you said Danbury?
No,
Specifically.
well, it said
Oh, oh,
DES, yeah, Danbury.
So it'd be the Danbury principal line, and it was,
Is it the nurse?
So what's in that line it's your principal line?
Is it the nurse
said
acting as
principal.
principal?
Professional
and principal's not there?
development, telephone postage,
Oh,
travel,
maybe.
supplies.
Oh, are you asking
Maybe.
about the 5348, the
Yeah.
$5,348, that decrease?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's at Danbury.
I mean,
right.
can you give me the actual account number?
2410, it's 10.2410,
yeah,
Okay, all right, all
111,
right.
3.5 for Danbury.
So this would be principal salaries there, and we base this directly on payroll, a level funding of the principal's pay and stipends. I think we took, didn't we have someone acting as an assistant principal, or we reduced that stipend?
The
no.
nurse.
Is that?
Would it be the nurse?
Only in
It would be the nurse that would be
She would be
this
112.
at
She's
Danbury.
considered a teacher.
But it would be under the principal's
regular.
budget, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that may be what it is then. That's, yeah, okay. And the other thing is, I know we had a warrant article, I'm pretty sure we had a warrant article a few years back about trying to do something about windows at the middle school.
The what?
Is there windows at the middle school? trying to get those windows replaced that are in
There
very
were a
bad
bunch
shape.
replaced a few years ago.
What,
There were a bunch replaced a few years ago.
were there?
We're actually in the process of scheduling a meeting with Honeywell. We got our annual summary update, and they owe us about, I think it was about $6,000, if I recall correctly, because they estimate what we should be
Behind my head is
gaining, you know, because
plastic.
it should be cost neutral. And so they want to meet with us. I preliminarily read the report that they gave us, and it looks like one of the they gave us obviously some things that would continue to help us. One is putting an air ventilation system at the middle school. The other would be, there was some window replacement at the middle school. So that is something through that Honeywell report we'll be able to look at and assess whether it's something, I think one of the things we need to do is really assess our buildings, if we're keeping them, and really look to say, what is, you know, so what do we need to do at the middle school to, you know, make it viable for the next 40 years, if that is gonna be the school? You know, what does that look like for 40 years from now? What do we need to update it to add ventilation? I mean, we do have moisture problems in that school that still exist. And so we've been.
Accessibility issues there too, don't we?
Yeah, so we've been, we've been meeting with Alan, and so he's been really starting to look at those kinds of things and trying to come up with you know, kind of a longer-term plan of
Yeah.
what do we need to do to our facilities to maintain them? And I think Windows is definitely on the Honeywell project.
Yeah, because I was
Under
thinking,
Now
if we
it-
couldn't do them
That'd
all,
be a
could you
capital
just do
project.
some every
Yeah.
year?
Yeah.
But yes, that would fit into that.
Sue and I have a
Yeah.
long list.
And
from the middle
ventilation
school
is
for you for
really
capital.
Yeah.
After
important.
the tour.
We did it I
Yeah.
think the last one was over $2 million, just the energy project that you did there, and that's our debt service that
And we-
you see in the budget.
Yeah, we just, you know,
Yeah.
there were
Which is
windows
cost
that were
neutral.
leaking and.
And
It's
they,
just to
they
periodically open the
fixed a
windows.
lot
We
of the
didn't need
windows, they
ventilations.
re-caulked
Caulked
them, or
them,
whatever you
yeah.
call it, but they said it really was just a temporary fix.
Yeah,
And it
and
is.
that was one of the
You don't get the
things-
natural light in there, you
One of the
get
things
miss
the
a lot.
report said was that because the windows aren't great, that some of the caulking is coming apart because they open and close poorly.
Yeah,
So that was part of the recommendation. So we'll be meeting with them. We have to schedule that meeting in.
Now, one other final thing that we'll need to address is to determine whether we want to transfer in from the facilities maintenance fund the $110,000.
Correct.
So that would have to be a fourth motion.
But is that the balance in the fund?
No,
No.
Oh, how much would be left?
10,000.
Yes.
10,000.
That's pretty oil tight.
Yes.
is that for two? That's
I-
Two well
I actually brought some of the detail on that I can discuss. On December 22nd, 2015 is the deadline to close all underground storage tank systems without secondary containment and leak monitoring. This has to do with the New Hampshire Code of Administrative Rules. I won't go into that. So what does it mean? Bristol, I think, Bristol Elementary School, the tank and systems are up to code and they're not gonna need anything else to comply. The middle school, that was Bristol Elementary School. The middle school, the tank has a sump pump, but will need to have double-walled fuel lines going to and from the tank to the boiler. It's also gonna need monitoring for the sub pump as well as an interstitial. Not quite sure what that is. I know that.
That's the
and
lining inside of it.
I knew
Yeah,
you would
am,
know that.
I replace more oil tanks.
So, the high school is
That's
where
funny.
is what we're gonna need the
Things
most
you
work.
learn.
Why, it's new. Relatively speaking.
You were.
It said they said the tank needs replacing as it's met its life expectancy. So this is the
89.
Yeah,
underground
20
tank.
years is about what they.
89, 99.
It requires for this rule though a double wall piping, a sump that's monitored, and the tank that's currently in use has the same kind of leaks that need replacing, which is I think it's a double. It has leaks in it, but they're going into the secondary tank or whatever it is.
Oh,
So when he looked at, he had already, and I say he is Alan, had quoted several options, and he's looking at any of these options really fix the problems right around 110,000. His quotes. So
For the one?
no, for
all
all
of it.
that
For- oh,
to
okay,
fix
for all
all
of it,
those
okay,
situations.
Including the middle school or just the?
Middle school,
Yeah.
high school, both situations there. And he said the elementary schools it complies.
In Danbury? in,
We didn't get, we didn't have any
Hampton.
problems with that, which, and
I thought they had something done
he
more
did, yeah,
recently.
they've been,
Yeah.
this is a project, Dan had told me when he left, he's like, these are the last in his tank
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
issues.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's a good idea.
It's probably is.
Are you gonna make
The
that?
deadline to meet these is December 22nd, 2015. And according to Alan, I think as long as we have them started, they'll be a little lenient on that day too.
Now,
Date.
if we don't take that money from the Facilities Maintenance Trust and choose instead to reserve that money perhaps for next year for windows in the middle school, then that would reduce the fund balance, not the fund balance, the tax cap number down to 480 from 580, 470 from
Yep.
580, right?
That's correct.
Plus the 350
Held in fund balance,
held in fund balance.
share equity.
So we'd still be in good shape. Assuming these revenue numbers are conservative and turn out to be
Accurate.
accurate, or within reason, or
Is-
low.
Is there another 60,000 being put into the maintenance trust?
You're gonna ask that.
It'll be the-
And in the transfers out, I think that's what it is. I was trying to look it up. I cannot get into our, I can't log into it, which has all the detail in it, so.
don't we-
Computers thwarted by technology again.
So what we voted this past year,
I think is included in that,
I'm pretty sure it's included, so
because I think it was like 60,000.
yes.
That was my recollection of having a conversation with Dan, was it was 60,000 and then the 60,000 added in last year.
Right. It's been 60,000 the past 2 years.
Yeah. Just how you really want to treat a reserve anyway. So it's, and a lot of people think that, why would you put money in when you're taking money out? Well, it's because you're consistently funding it, and you will use it on occasion. In one year, you might almost drain it, another year might use only 10% of it, but that's what gives you that budget consistency.
it seems to me though that the use of it would be more for the tanks, because we have a deadline, it has to be done, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
With the windows, it's a little different.
Yeah.
And plus, you have all these things going on too.
Well, and then we
these
have to straighten
discussions.
out the rules to get access to it and assign the board as agents, et cetera.
And I probably want to do the windows under another energy contract, because there's some
Yeah, there's some savings.
Yeah.
grant money for stuff like that
Yeah.
too. Or is this, I think Alan and Dan had really looked over all the things they could do to find funds. This is,
So why wouldn't we consider not moving that money and taking it out of the tax cap balance?
Why would you want to take it to the tax cap when you already have it?
Because rather than keeping it, I'd be reducing it. And I'm suggesting that maybe it should be kept because there's a lot of room in the tax cap.
But it doesn't mean you have to
you
spend it
still
all.
have the teacher's contract you're
Right.
negotiating, which is limited by that
Whoa,
number.
whoa, 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 whoa. There's 580,000 plus the 350. If we reduce that by 110, we still have the 350, so it's 470 and 350.
It's 370 if this passes.
But there are things that probably won't go through to use that 350 for. So you have to be a little careful to counting on that.
You're having a lot of
Anything.
confidence
Yeah.
that the permutations of what you're gonna go through to get fund balance, that they would use that to pay for wage increases and benefits.
No, I'm not,
I
no,
think
I'm
it'll
saying
be-
that's our contingency fund.
But this is
But
our
it can't
first
be
year without
ignored.
contingency funds, so I want to leave it there as a contingency.
Yeah, and I think we
110
slapped really
was
hard.
funded, people already
I think
paid
the
for
Or-
it.
purpose
or
of it
just-
is
they just wouldn't give it
emergencies.
to you.
And it's
Right,
for
and that would be,
buildings.
that'd be awful.
Right.
Let's use it on buildings.
Yeah, well, you can't ignore it because it's going to contribute to the basis for which we calculate a retained balance next year.
Yeah, but I think they could turn around and tell us that, no, we can't use that money, we have to take the money from somewhere else.
For what?
Say we decide to try and take 110,000 to do the tanks out of that fund. it doesn't get approved,
Well, we wouldn't.
we've already
because
spent the money out of the budget for something else. Now they're gonna tell us,
Well,
well,
we-
you can't use that
We're not
money.
gonna take that money out of there for that.
We wouldn't, because
No.
that's the reason we have the facilities
So why
maintenance
do you
fund.
keep throwing it out there for ways to spend it?
I'm not suggesting we spend it, I'm talking about how much we have available.
Then I don't think we
But
should count it,
that's contingency.
because I don't think we have it available.
It is absolutely available. That's the reason we didn't fund any contingencies in this budget.
I'll tell you,
But
in the 20-year history of Dover, when we looked at using, we had an $8 million fund balance. They used it only twice in 20 years. And it was for a change in the budget that there's no way the budget could absorb that. And they still had to go through a major haggling to get it. It was even in what I would consider an actual emergency where the contract, and it had to do with obligations under existing union contract in a capped budget. They had to honor it legally. So the city had to actually cough up the fund balance. Outside of that, unless, like an act of God that wasn't covered by insurance, they weren't gonna give up any of that money. We never counted it, only as a contingency for something like if a special ed student came in.
Right.
In your budget, and the first thing they would say is,
Is there
you
money
need
in
to
the
cut that
budget?"
internally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they were saying, you've got to cover that, 250,000 internally. And we would have to make a case to prove that we would create detrimental harm to the education system for cutting it. That's just my experience.
I mean, I think that fund,
Discount it, but-
I think you want that fund to be for an emergency.
Yeah,
But
and
nobody's talking
Yeah.
about using that fund.
it's just that I don't want to forget that it's available to us. That's all.
And do
Because
we need
always
to,
seem to end up with a significant fund balance. And this year, because we aren't budgeting for contingencies, we're relying on the fund balance retention to cover us there. That may not be true in June. We may not have a significant fund balance for the first time in years.
do we need to have a warrant to recalculate that contingency amount?
No, we passed, it's not a contingency, it's a fund balance, retained fund balance.
Retained.
We passed the warrant to be able to consider that every
Okay,
year,
that's
but it is
permanent.
limited to
To
an
the-
amount based on
The
the fund
2.5%.
balance annually, to 2.5%. It doesn't accumulate and just roll over.
You might have to give some of that back.
Yeah.
So, so it boils down to whether we want to forecast this 580,000 or forecast 470 and not have the facilities maintenance trust fund, that's all. That's what I'm asking.
Well, you still have the trust fund, and every year you put back in it.
Right, I want to transfer the 110.
As long as you get the vote, yeah, that's voted each year.
Let's use it.
Well, I think we
Use
ought to
the
use it and
facilities.
restructure it.
What's that?
Use the facilities trust.
Yeah, I think we should use it,
Okay, that's.
eliminate it, restructure it.
So you think we should transfer another?
Well, it depends on
I think we
What
should
Mike-
transfer the whole 120.
what
And
I
then
think
come
Mike
that-
back
finds
in.
out is the best way.
I think you can only use what you're planning to expend it for that purpose.
Right, we would, in this case, we would say, especially, so this is kind of covered under both the trust and a capital reserve, if you want to go one of those two ways. The DRA seems to think it's an expendable trust. I'm sure we could do some convincing and that, actually, this is really a reserve, and if we find it going forward, we can provide the right paperwork. Either way, this would be covered. However, for a capital expenditure, it would only cover the exact dollar amount of the project. So you wouldn't be able to say, well, there's more in the account, so why don't we just pop it into the budget, and it would act as other revenue.
Yeah, I know.
So I wouldn't be able to do that, and usually an expendable trust too, you'd want to designate the fund specifically. And I know even as an expendable trust, that fund was designated for repairs and maintenance. So, I mean, right now, the only project that you have in your long-term plan was the 110. We could, of course, discuss another project to cover for the other 10,000.
Jeff wasn't suggesting spending it on a project, he was suggesting removing it, spending what it took to do the tanks and putting the rest back into an account that's properly set up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were putting the whole 120 into
Right,
the-
Jeff?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
because we can take that money out and put it back into another trust, can't we?
I would say
Or
we
not
just
a trust,
reconfigure what the.
a reserve fund.
I'll give you some options.
The question on the trust itself is how we're gonna end up being able to spend it, and whether or not the school board has been appointed as agents.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And if we have been, then we're done. If we haven't been, we need to do that.
Oh,
Separate discussion, but it's a minor change. I
And
don't
I-
think we should transfer 120,000 with 10 grand floating with
for,
no purpose.
we'd repurpose whatever is remaining in that trust one way or the other, so you don't have to transfer the whole dollar amount.
Yeah.
So if you, I think the DRA would say that you'd want it to be an expendable trust, but I'm sure, we'll discuss that further another time.
Okay.
I would transfer the amount for the specific project that you want, which, no matter what, whatever direction you choose would fit.
Okay. Does anyone have any other adjustments or
So-
changes to make?
I just had a question on that.
So-
So you would transfer it, you would have a vote that you would like to use it for that specific thing, right? And then when the bill came in, you would pay it from that, I mean, how does that?
No, I would actually transfer.
Because we don't know the exact amount, do we?
We have a quote for, the detail in the quote's 110,000. And, you know, like any project, you're right, it could be a little bit here or there. So we transfer the dollar amount to
Yeah.
cover, once we would get the exact pricing, you would transfer that dollar amount.
And then if it
Okay.
Up
left
to,
over.
so the way I would, you would want to present the transfers in the budget, you would appropriate $110,000, and that's all we could work within. And then when I go out to bid,
Yep.
yes.
And your motion would be to
Not
transfer up
exceed
to,
X amount of dollars.
Up to.
up to 110, and then if it only comes to
Yeah.
98,000,
Right.
the rest would get transferred back into
Right.
that fund.
Correct.
That's-
The expendable, transfer of facilities maintenance expendable trust to the general ledger?
The general fund.
General fund, right, okay. 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 I think we're done on the budget, are we not? Does anyone have anything else?
Whose motion you want first?
Okay, hold on.
Oh, we gotta go back to the beginning.
The wages.
Right, just don't forget any of that. Everybody's got their motions ready, right? Okay. Do we have any other business under 9Z? Hearing none, that brings us to public comment. For items on the agenda only. Does anyone in the audience care to comment on agenda items only? Yes, I'd like to recognize Heather first.
Fred Robinson, Danbury.
Oh,
About the resource officer, the idea of the warrant article sounds like a really good idea. But what happens if in the general election, everybody says, yes, we want to have a warrant article, or a warrant officer, or a resource officer, excuse me. And then Bristol has its town meeting, and they vote that they do not want it. What happens then?
That's what has to be clarified.
Would the school districts vote Trump, the
No.
towns? Yeah, I know.
But it couldn't, because the town would have to be, the town would be if it failed within the town, we couldn't actually do it, because the town doesn't have a resource officer to give us.
Right,
Right, so
But-
they would vote no in your example.
but that would be in a later election. That would actually be in a later election, because they have their town meetings.
Are they
after-
SB2? Is the town
They're-
SB2?
No.
Okay.
So it would be the second Tuesday in March.
March.
Yeah, in March.
But couldn't you then negotiate with one of the other towns
Well,
for them to hire the resource officer?
see, that's the problem. It's the
Oh.
jurisdictional
Actually-
issue that renders the challenge for us.
Yeah.
okay?
Actually,
And
that's
why
not
Bristol's
true.
got to pass on it.
Sure.
That is absolutely not true.
Unless, hold on, unless we agree on a sheriff and want to bring a sheriff in.
No, it's still
Now,
not
the
true.
Bristol Police Department doesn't agree with that. And
It's
that's
still
where
not
the
true.
discussion was left the last time.
But that still isn't true.
Okay, explain to me what is
Okay.
not true.
In New Hampshire, a law enforcement officer is certified to work in the state. In a lot of cases, you have officers from communities work within other communities based on need. Special details,
Part-time.
part-time, population increases. So, the first thing I would come up with is there's, you just said there's 3 counties involved. There's 3 different sheriff departments that could do it. I think that any of the officers from any of the towns, and then there's the other issues, like maybe PSU could provide an officer. They're certified as well.
Except that when it was brought up last year, Chief Lewis explained that jurisdictional issues created a problem with that choice.
Well, I would direct that question to police standards.
Okay, well,
Because I don't know that somebody could arrest, I don't know that somebody like from PSU could arrest somebody in Bristol.
without dwelling on this
There would
subject.
have to be something there.
The warrant article motion needs to direct the superintendent to create the warrant in such a way that it works. That's where the research comes in. And she's gonna have to cooperate with Chief Lewis in this case, given jurisdictional issues, to write it so that the school district will consider it, put it on the ballot, and approve it at the polls or vote it down at the polls. That's our choice. So, thank you for the question, Fred.
Yeah,
Just
just
to elaborate
with
further.
their election being later, you know,
Yeah.
they could trump the whole thing.
It's one of the issues that comes up in that discussion. So. Fred, would you like to speak?
Bristol. Dawn, that was an excellent recap of the Hill meeting. I got to talk to a lot of people in the audience as I attended, and they were in great support of joining your district. The resource officer, as a Bristol resident, that's a lot of money to serve 1/6 of our district, or 1/6 of our buildings. I don't see how it would benefit the other buildings, because if there was an issue in Danbury, the Danbury police are gonna get there a whole lot quicker than the resource officer at the high school. It's just really benefiting one school, if you ask me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. That brings us around to, I can find where I am here, page 5. Action items. Now, I think we can go through these quickly. We chose not to consider anything for the consent agenda this evening, so we have nothing for 11A. We can now move on to 12A, which is the suggestion for policies for first reading. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the policies for first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Paul, as moved by Ruby. Is there further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the policies for first reading as written, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the vote is 6-0-0 with one excuse being Bristol. That's approved. We're now at 12B, policies for second reading. Is there a motion?
Yep.
Jeff moves the motion to approve the policies written for second reading. That's IKFC, awarding of diplomas, and JJF, student activities funds management.
Second.
Is there a second by
Oh.
Sue?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Is there further discussion? If this motion passes, these will become policy, effective immediately. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the vote is 6 in the affirmative, no abstentions, no one opposed, one excused, that being Bristol. Okay, we are now considering item 12C, which is the removal of policy IGDG, Student Activities Funds Management. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Moved by Ruby. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion? Hearing none, if you vote to approve, this policy will be removed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, vote is 6-0-0 with one absent, that being Bristol. One excused, I'm sorry. That motion is approved. That now brings us to acceptance of the retirement notifications.
So moved.
The motion should be to accept the list provided by Superintendent Buckley
With gratitude for their service.
with gratitude
Thanks.
and thanks for their service to NASD. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I second.
Paul moved and Ruby seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? The retirement notifications are accepted as submitted by a vote of 6-0-0 with one excuse, that being Bristol. Moving us on to item 12E, tax cap limitations on the proposed budget by the NASD Budget Committee. I don't believe we have any action necessary here. Any objection? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 12F. Distribution and review of updated data task force spreadsheets comparing NASD to cohort districts. I don't believe we have any formal action here, given that we've asked the BA to update in real time along the lines of as soon as possible, so no action is necessary. Bringing us to 12G, also no action is necessary. Report of the Hill School District, unless someone has something in mind. I don't believe so. Hearing none. We're now at the warrant articles for the deliberative session on Saturday, February 1st. Now, we discussed the budget article and necessary default budget article, presumably the teachers' collective bargaining agreement, if reached, with a follow-up negotiations article, and a building maintenance article, assuming there's a fund balance, to transfer $60,000 to it. Possible consideration of a special education expendable trust reserve.
I would probably do a reserve fund. They're different from a capital reserve. So for the, and you could, we would set it up, you know, in the form of a warrant article, and we would describe exactly what the purpose of the reserve would be, and it would probably be for out of district placements that, like, or court appointed placements and things like that, out of the control of the district as a contingency.
And with the school board as agents.
Of course. Yeah.
There's that. Now, the other possibility is that you could, Jeff, add to it your SRO warrant at this point on this item in the agenda, if you want to just propose that separately.
Okay.
Seems appropriate. So,
Okay.
given that discussion, what we're going to assume, Stacy, is that that's the baseline, along with a what's on the warrant mailer.
Yep.
And that Jeff would like to add the following motion.
Motion to direct the superintendent to develop and submit a warrant article designed to create the position of district school resource officer with the associated cost, subject to any required mutual aid agreements.
Moved by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Paul.
There
Further
probably needs to be a-
discussion.
I'm sorry.
Stacy.
I would just add with cost items included. Does it say anything about cost?
With the associated cost.
Okay, sorry.
It's likely that you'll have to name those numbers.
Yep.
Of
Oh, yeah,
course.
definitely.
Okay. That'll be cross-referenced up in that little circle up there, Jeff, as item 12H. If you could write that in, please, and pass it down to me. Is there further discussion on it? I shall reread the motion.
Seconded.
Who's second?
Did we have a second?
Yes, Paul
Paul did.
seconded.
Oh, okay.
To direct the superintendent to develop and submit a warrant article designed to create the position of district school resource officer with the associated costs, subject to any required mutual aid agreements.
You said district-wide, is that your wording?
So that the
Yeah,
officer
gives the
could go to
flexibility.
Danbury or New Hampton or,
I think
But
that's
they
what you
can't
mean
if
by
there's
the
a
mutual aid,
jurisdiction
right?
yes.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the vote is 6-0-0 with one excuse, that being Bristol. Cross-reference 12H, Leah.
Right.
That now brings us to,
Can I interject one thought?
on,
Stacy, when you had the test at the elementary school, I think you said all the police officers were there.
Yep, we had multiple, including from Hill.
So how is that different?
We weren't arresting anybody?
Jurisdiction, yeah.
How is that, how is that different from,
From only, Bristol only being able to deal with the high school?
because it was, one, it was a training exercise. So I don't think there's any jurisdictional lines, but two is, if it was an emergency, if there was an active shooter in that school, there is no mutual aid requirement. Everybody will come.
yeah, including
There
the
is
state
no
police.
conversation, or, I mean,
Okay.
at that, if it was a true emergency at that point, it doesn't
It's a
matter
true
what
emergency.
that jurisdiction is, everybody will be there.
It's an all call.
Yeah.
Certainly not to minimize that, but due to the lateness of the hour and our continued requirement to meet briefly afterwards, I'd like to move on to 12J, which is to finalize the proposed budget for the year. I think we have 3 proposals pending, 3 motions pending.
Okay, here we go.
Right.
Paul already seconded it, but
Who is the other one? I have one regarding transfer of facilities. Someone, and Ruby's gonna add to it. So we need another one to,
Take $72,000.
or you can incorporate taking the SRO numbers out of it in your motion. Would you
no,
go-
I don't think it should be part of the same motion. I
All
don't
right.
want this
No.
linked to the SRO.
Right.
Okay.
It's not a trade-off.
Then we need another motion. Somebody's gotta make it.
Well, Jeff was the, wow.
Okay, and I'll read this.
Okay, go
I
ahead and write up
motioned,
to
Paul
pull it out.
seconded, even though he's gotta do it again. Budget $100,000 for wage adjustments for support staff, program specialists, and administration.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Oh, now I gotta
Oh,
change it. I wrote
Paul
Paul.
already did second that, I
Yes.
think. Do
Are
you
you
want to
seconding
continue,
it, Paul?
Paul?
I did, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, good, so put your name on it.
Okay, this is 12J1. Add 100K for support. Cross-reference 12J1. 12J number 1. Okay, is there further discussion? Made by Ruby and seconded by Paul. Hearing no discussion. Motion before you is to budget $100,000 for wage adjustments for support staff, program specialists, and administration. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? And Bristol is excused. So the motion to add $100,000 to the budget passes. Paul, do you have a motion before us?
Make a motion to remove the resource officer from the budget and submit as a warrant article at the deliberative session, I guess.
Well, can you just suggest that we remove it from the budget as proposed? Because we've already
Yeah.
passed his warrant article. As currently proposed, I guess. Okay. Okay, motion made by Paul to remove the resource officer from the budget as proposed. I'm gonna say deleting 72,000.
72, correct?
Okay with that? Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Ruby? Okay, this is item 12J, number 2. Without further discussion, all those in favor, you signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, no abstentions. Motion passes 6-0-0-1. Okay. There is another motion regarding the trust fund, which will be 12J number 3. I will move on the 12th of November to transfer in from the Facilities Maintenance Expendable Trust to the general fund to replace leaking oil tanks at the district facilities for a not-to-exceed amount of $110,000 at the Newfound Middle School and the Newfound Regional High School. Sound okay?
That's good.
Is there a second? Seconded by Paul. Okay, the motion before you is to transfer in as item 12J3 from the expendable trust fund to the general fund, $110,000 as proposed in the budget, for a not-to-exceed amount. All those in favor, if there's no further discussion, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, the motion carries 6-0-0 with Bristol absent. Okay, moving
So,
right along.
Can we do one more motion? So can you make a motion to approve a final budget?
Oh, yes,
a
we should do
Fund
that.
10 budget?
I'm sorry, you're
It's
right.
okay, I'll keep you on task.
Now, you do the math for me.
I did, so
You
the final,
did the
no,
math
yeah,
for me, okay.
I'm on this one.
So
So
12.
the final number is 20,310,865. That's your starting number of 20,282,865 plus 100,000 minus 72,000.
Which brings the dollar difference down to around 25,000 less, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
28.
Okay. Is there a motion to pass the new number of the recommended budget by the school board for FY15
So moved.
to be in the amount of $20,310,865? By Paul, is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Ruby. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that budget has now passed as a recommended budget. And that is item 12J4.
Manifest too, don't forget.
Just for your information, today is 11/12/13, you know?
11, 12, 13, that's right. In
Yes,
in
I just-
another hour, it's gonna be 11, 12, 13 too, if we
I
don't
just
get
said that.
rocking and rolling. We're now at 12Z, which means there is nothing else.
Yes.
Sue has something else.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you have other business?
Manifest.
That's not other business. That's an
Oh,
agenda
you said there
item
is nothing else, so I got scared.
for other business.
Okay.
That moves us beyond 12Z to 13, which is manifests. Sue,
I move to approve the manifest for the month of October 2013.
Second.
seconded
Thank
by
you.
Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Vincent.
Okay, motion to approve October. Any discussion? Okay, we're current, unbelievable.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 6-0-0 with one absent, that being Bristol. Okay.
Excuse.
Again, we're at announcements. Item 14A, the November 25th meeting of the school board will be a regular board meeting at which an agenda item discussing recommendations by Superintendent Buckley will be made regarding configuration of schools. To let everyone know. That is Monday evening, I believe, right?
Correct.
Normally it is, okay. I direct you to other announcements on the agenda, a number of different things, not the least of which includes the reminder on Mr. Mills' accomplishment after being here 44 years for this Sunday. And does anyone else have any announcements? Okay, hearing none. I believe our next regularly scheduled board meeting this time is November 25th, and following that for December, it will be on the 9th. Is there a motion to adjourn at 10:15?
So moved.
Moved by Ruby, seconded by Paul. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. We are now adjourned, and we are going to adjourn to room